God give you good day. Welcome to Saffron Walden.
Welcome to Saffron.
We know that saffron arrived in Saffron Walden by 1444, possibly earlier, but it was not until a century later that we know for sure that Chepping, or Market Walden, was now being called Saffron Walden.
Greetings to all here, to those here in the ancient market of Chepping, that being Saffron Walden. Please give good greetings to the Mayor of Saffron Walden. Yay! By the grace of God, Defender of the Faith, Queen Elizabeth of England.
God save the Queen!
Lord Mayor, Her Majesty the Queen, by the grace of God, has travelled from London to meet you. Lord Mayor, Aldermen and citizens of this town.
Your gracious Majesty, we of this town doth thank you for your royal presence to this town. We are here to celebrate the golden strands of saffron that make this town famous. Our gifts to you are these: a box of silver angels, a silver box of the saffron, the Crocus sativus, the saffron crocus.
My Lord Mayor, Aldermen, citizens of this town, we, your Prince, do thank you most heartily for your welcome to this worthy town. We all thank you for these generous gifts that you do present to us. The fame of this humble but perfect flower has been used in medicine, in beauty, in dye, of course, for culinary secrets, to flavour dishes. All from the golden treasure protected within the delicate but perfect lilac petals around it. This flower has given this town prosperity and fame. A town formerly known as Chepping Walden, the word Chepping indicating market, as held here in Walden since the year 1141. The people of this town have been referring to this place as Saffron Walden since the reign of our beloved brother, King Edward of blessed memory. It is now our great pleasure to confirm that henceforth the town shall now be known as Saffron Walden. The name of Saffron Walden, as shown on the town seal showing this gentle flower, is now granted to you in perpetuity. I charge you all here to make merry this day, to celebrate the saffron flower and the noble home of Saffron Walden.
God save the Queen! Her Majesty will be in audience in the Royal Pavilion. Huzzah!
Welcome to Saffron Day.
Saffron, the expensive spice used to flavour and colour food to produce a rich yellow dye and valued for its medicinal qualities, became a source of prosperity for the town, which was a centre of the area's saffron trade. Probably at its height during the 17th century, saffron production declined slowly and had disappeared from Saffron Walden by about 1790. This year, saffron, source of the town's unique name, is once again being celebrated by residents and visitors alike. Its history described and its importance discussed, culminating visually and enjoyably in the festival of Saffron Day.
So we just started growing in the containers, and then with some success, it was all right. Put them in the ground, and the first year they flowered okay, not too bad. But the second year when I came to dig the bulbs up, or the corms, they're actually technically corms because they die down each year and regrow back. Unlike a daffodil bulb which will split and propagate like that, these die down, so all that will disappear. The old bulb is the bit on the bottom, which you can't really see. They've gone. There'll be an old little bit on the bottom of the old bulb, and then the new bulb will grow completely again, but with smaller ones around the side.
In 1 year?
In 1 year. We put them in the garden. The next year I went there, so second or third year, I got a tiny little bag of saffron, about that much, out of the crop. Went to dig the bulbs up, the corms, literally nothing there. Must have been mice or something. It's quite nutritious. You can actually eat saffron corms. Very nutty taste. Reasonably successful, and they seem to flower okay. And I said we had to be nomadic, and it's quite good to have a virgin or new piece of ground to grow them in, because they like ground that hasn't been used by another plant. So for example in Spain, every 8 or 12 years they'll move the whole crop, dig it all up, move it to a new field, and then they won't go back to that original field for 20 years. You can have diseases and all sorts of problems if you grow in the same ground again too quickly. You'll see in bridge end gardens we grow them in raised beds in rows. Bridge end gardens over there is like a small snapshot of a commercial plantation or garden where you would grow them in rows that go way up. None of it can really be mechanised, but we can sort of till the land with a cultivator and stuff, and obviously it's easier to do rows. We found a way of making them flower, which is quite useful. We've grown bigger and bigger over the years, but there's only certain size you can get to unless you can get labour to help you. But one thing we are doing now is we're working at Tiptree Jam, Wilkin and Sons, and they're helping us grow hydroponically as well. I've always wanted to do it for years, because it's not just about preserving the saffron industry an aspect of medieval times. It's about taking it to the 21st century and make it a commercial crop that can survive and grow. So by trialling these hydroponic techniques, trying to get it into the 21st century. So we pick about 1,000 flowers an hour, and we process about 300 an hour. And the way to tell real saffron from fake saffron is pretty much every false saffron, you put it in your hand or in a porcelain bowl and just lick your finger and smear it like that. False saffron will come out red, and real saffron comes out yellow. So the main growing areas are Kashmir, Iran, Greece. But when you put the saffron corms into a nice fertile English soil, they really like it as well, and it gives them a slightly sweeter honey flavour rather than the more bitter flavour you get with saffron. But all saffron's lovely and it's amazing. You just have to know how much to use in the cooking to get the taste right.
The iconic saffron emblem appears all over the town in various guises, from the wooden adornments in the church to bank logos, signposts, and you can also find it etched in Pargetin on many buildings.
I work as a pargeter, and I've come here to Saffron Day to introduce people to pargeting if they've never done it before. And down here on the workbench is a whole load of panels where all my students are all busy practicing pargeting. with pargeting tools. That's a saffron flower for Saffron Day, and you can make pretty designs like that. And that's a very traditional parget design for Saffron Walden. Here, and I'm doing a little bit of a demo of this. This is a saffron flower.
Yep.
So this, whereas what I showed you earlier was stamped parget and combed parget, this is freehand and with the real material, which is lime plaster and chalk and synthetic hair. And I put it on, and it's very sticky when you put it on. Right, so you can't really model it particularly well at this stage because it's too sticky. You get it approximately the right amount in approximately the right place, and then you leave it, and gradually the moisture draws out of it, and an hour or two later it'll be a lot firmer, so you can then put some detail of finish on the surface.
I'm a food historian, and I have written a book on the history of English saffron, specifically its culinary uses throughout history. And I have been at Saffron Day looking at how it was used in savoury foods like sauces, for example green sauce, which was really tasty. And also I'm talking about the uses in sweets, things like biscuits. So we have gingerbread, for example, which the original recipe contains cinnamon, saffron and pepper, but curiously no ginger. And we've also got some St. Keverne feast cakes, and that's also flavoured with saffron and coloured with saffron.
Good one.
So we think there's a few reasons why saffron declined. Partly taste, so we started to use a lot less spices in cookery in general, so it was really popular from the medieval era, so 15th, 16th century, 17th century. But then when we get to the 18th century, it starts to decline. So whereas it was used extensively in savoury foods, like fish dishes and chicken dishes, for example, and dishes made with almond milk, by the time we get to the 18th century, you really only see it being used extensively in sweet goods like saffron cakes. And they actually used to be made quite frequently with seeds rather than the currants and raisins that we associate now. And certainly in Essex they grew coriander seeds, and there's a recipe in my book that has saffron and coriander seeds in for a saffron cake. But then by the 19th century I think it was just tastes were changing, so apart from Anglo-Indian recipes, for example, where it was used sometimes to colour rice dishes and in curries, it really sort of fell out of favour. And there would have been the expense in terms of it being grown in this country, which is cheaper to import. We still have things like Christmas pudding and mince pies, which are reasonably highly spiced. But when you think to the medieval era, our cuisine was far more exotic. It would be now, if you could go back in time, you'd think, okay, that's quite Middle Eastern flavours going on in medieval food that was served in English courts, royal courts, or noble households. Whereas by sort of the 19th century, it was more French, and even the French weren't using spices. And it is an artisan product, so little has changed in so many respects in the way it's produced compared to hundreds of years ago.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Miss Kirkpatrick, and this is Dr. Cowley, and we're here this morning to talk to you about saffron. We're called Saffron Walden because about 500 years ago we were the centre of the saffron growing industry. It is the most expensive spice in the world. It was grown in the autumn. The father would dig the holes, the mothers would put the corns in, and the children would help as well. When you come to harvest it, you go out first thing in the morning and you pick the flowers, and then you bring it back. Then you have to get from the middle of the flower all the very thin threads. Then you have to dry it.
This is what the flower actually looks like. Very beautiful. So if you can imagine Saffron Walden, or Chipping Walden as it was then, about 500 years ago, all the fields up towards Windmill Hill would have been covered in this gorgeous purple flower in the autumn. Some of you might know other crocuses, because this is called a crocus plant, too, that grow in the spring. That is not the same thing. If you were to use the threads from one of those crocuses, you'd be really poorly, because it's poisonous. These are very highly coloured, and that can be used as a thing called a dye. So the very wealthy people, because this cost a lot of money, like the king over there, would have been wearing things dyed with saffron. The knight, person in the middle there looking very splendid, might have had the odd thing, but the poor old peasant over there would definitely not have been wearing anything to do with saffron. They didn't have any chemicals at all, so all the dyes came from natural things. Yellow, as you just heard, came from saffron. Orange came from another spice called turmeric that is commonly used in curries. And a bit like a dye, they were also using it as an ink. The people who were really good at writing were people who were priests, they were monks. And they made these quite amazing illustrated books, mostly things about the Bible or religious things, but absolutely beautiful. And they found out that if you mix saffron with tin, powdered tin, you can get gold. Not real gold, but it looked like gold. Two other uses as a dye that you may not have thought about. You may not have thought that people were doing this 500 years ago, but it was actually used as a hair dye to make people's hair sort of yellowy. Saffron they found actually did help a lot of things. It would help you cure infections. It was thought to heal wounds. You might have heard of somebody called Alexander the Great, who a long time ago was a very famous soldier. When he came out of battle, he'd have a bath in saffron water, and it probably did heal his wounds a bit quicker. People who went to war, because they were wearing the same clothes all the time, would get very, very dirty. And soldiers used to dye their shirts in saffron because that stopped the things like lice. Have you heard of those? Nasty little itchy insects which infest the clothes, which happened as recently as the First World War. So they'd use shirts that were dunked in saffron because that would stop the lice from attaching quite so much. But they also felt that saffron would make you much happier. And they also thought that if you had too much of it, it had side effects. So it would give you a headache, it would stop you sleeping. One thing they said is if you have too much saffron, you will die of merriment. You'd be so happy, you would die laughing, literally. When doctors were trying to find out what was wrong with somebody, make a diagnosis, they'd do two things. They'd feel your pulse to see what that was like, but they'd also ask you to do a wee sample in a pot. And that was really, really important. And the doctors, in order to work out what was wrong with you from your wee sample, would look at the colour and work something out, but they'd also taste it.
Ew.
Yeah, exactly. Say if somebody had diabetes, you might be able to work out that there was too much sugar in their wee, so it would taste sweet. But it was pretty disgusting, really. Back 500 years ago, something called the plague. Really bad thing. It was much worse even than COVID's been for us. It killed an awful lot of people. And here's a picture. So you'd be absolutely covered in big pussy spots, particularly in your neck, under your arms, in your groins as well. And you'd get a very high fever, and the odds are you're going to die when you had it, so it was really serious. And saffron was really, they felt, was very useful in helping. You may have seen these amazing pictures. These are called plague doctor pictures. So they've got their bodies are covered, their hands are covered, and their faces are covered with a sort of really quite peculiar mask. And it must have been quite scary seeing somebody like this going around the town. But actually, if you think about it, with COVID, is it that different from what we saw all our health workers doing? I'll tell you one preparation for plague. They're often quite complicated. Take an egg, make a hole in the top of it, take out the white and the yolk and fill the shell with saffron, so that would have cost a lot. Roast the shell in embers of charcoals until the shell goes yellow, then beat the shell and the contents together in a mortar with a bit of mustard, and as soon as anybody was thought to have the plague, you would mix it with a bit of beer, drink a little bit of it and hope for the best. And also people would go around with a little pouch around their necks which they filled with saffron and other herbs to try and prevent it from happening. But they're actually doing research now into saffron and finding that it actually does help many things, many illnesses. So yeah, used in lots and lots of foods. Again, if you were very wealthy like our king, maybe if like our knights, you would have had access to quite a lot of food flavoured with saffron. So it might have been sweet things like cakes and buns. It might have been savoury things like, if you're maybe not in this country, but over in the east, you would have rice-based dishes flavoured with saffron. And in fact, we still use them today. Have any of you eaten a rice dish called paella? It's a Spanish dish, yeah. That's traditionally still got saffron in it. So I've made you some biscuits to try with saffron in.
Well, can we say thank you to you as well for being a brilliant class? Now you know why Saffron Walden is called Saffron Walden.
History is alive in the streets of Saffron Walden, so come and find out why a warm welcome is our greatest custom.